strengthened since our foundation through the work of Pope Francis and his call for us to respect the lives and dignity of all people. As we listen to the story, in the stories of both our speakers today, it's important to realize that they have the power to transform minds and hearts, but that stories impact us each differently. And the topics that we're going to talk about today are pretty heavy. And it's okay to be attentive to how you're feeling. If you need to get up, move, or step out into the hallway, please feel free to do so. And I want to also share for those who are part of the Ursuline College community that one of the stories we're going to talk about is from an event that happened close to this college 30 years ago. We hope that violent events never happen again, but just acknowledging that at least one of these stories hits a little close to home. So if you want to talk through this event or anything that you heard today or your feelings about it with anyone, you have your counseling office and folks in campus ministry as well to really talk through some things. So please avail yourself of those resources if you need them, and just acknowledging, that any reaction you have and any feelings you have to this story are all valid. I just want to share a little bit about the state of the death penalty in the United States as of right now. In the United States right now, 23 states have abolished the death penalty, and 27 still haven't. 4 of those states, including Ohio, are under a moratorium, meaning the governor has stopped all executions for a particular reason. In this year alone, 7 men have already been executed in 3 different states. The most recent execution was last night when Michael King was executed by the state of Florida. Since 1973, 202 innocent people have been freed from death row. People who were wrongly imprisoned for the crime that they were accused of. And one of those is one of our speakers today, the 202nd, Mr. Elwood Jones. And then we have this heavy number. Since the start of the resumption of the death penalty in 1978, 1,653 individuals have been executed in the United States. Just to talk a little bit about the death penalty in Ohio, currently there are 114 people on Ohio's death row, which makes it one of the largest death rows in the country. And in Ohio, 102 innocent people that have been freed from death row. 12 of those, just to talk a little bit about the death penalty in Ohio, currently there are 100, and I mentioned that moratorium as well. And what that has been is since Governor Mike DeWine has taken office, he has said that it is unfeasible for executions to take place in the state. And so he has stopped everyone and pushed those execution dates off. We're hopeful that Governor DeWine would support ending Ohio's death penalty this year, and we'll talk a little bit later about ways that might happen. And just a few bits of information. The Catholic Church has taught over the last 30 years, especially, that the death penalty is inadmissible because it violates the dignity of human life. It prioritizes vengeance over forgiveness and mercy, which are at the core of our faith. Pope Francis updated the Catechism of the Catholic Church to use that word inadmissible, to make it clear that we as Catholics cannot support the death penalty because it violates our understanding of the love that God has for us in the person of Jesus Christ. There are other challenges with the death penalty beyond that human dignity. The death penalty disproportionately affects society's most vulnerable, people with mental illness, intellectual disabilities, or serious health concerns. A stat from 2024 is that 96% of people who were executed had one of those issues. And despite the Supreme Court saying that it is unconstitutional to execute people with intellectual disabilities, at least 3 individuals with intellectual disabilities were executed last year alone. The death penalty is also rooted in a racist history in our country. We can draw a direct link from enslavement to convict leasing, to lynching, to mass incarceration, to the death penalty. People of color are disproportionately represented on death row. People of color who are accused of killing a white person are much more likely to receive a death sentence than those who kill other black or brown individuals. And also, one of the biggest sort of supports of the death penalty is that it deters crime, right? But that is not borne out at all in the statistics. States with the death penalty in general have higher rates of violent crime than states that don't. And the South of the United States was responsible for 80% of executions that take place and has one of the highest murder rates in the country. And in addition, because of the problems in the system, the United States has used primarily lethal injection for the last 30 years. But in this desire to push for more executions and coming up against medical companies that do not want their drugs rightly used to take people's lives, states have brought back old methods. 2 states, Utah and South Carolina, have executed people via firing squad. And 3 states have legalized death by nitrogen suffocation, which is now the primary method of execution in the state of Alabama. But what we really want to talk about more than stats and figures is stories of people whose lives have been affected the most by the system of capital punishment. We have 2 guests here. We have Mr. Elwood Jones. Mr. Elwood Jones is a Cincinnati native and is the 202nd innocent person to be freed from death row. Additionally, we have Sister Maureen McCarthy, who is an Ursuline sister and part of the community here. She's going to tell a story about a really sad crime that happened here 30 years ago, and talking about her community's response to that healing. So we'll spend most of our time in conversation with our panelists, and so could you please give a nice warm round of applause to Mr. Elwood Jones and this Sister Maureen McCarthy. So we'll spend most of our time in conversation with our panelists, and so could you please give a nice warm round of applause to Mr. Elwood Jones and this Sister Maureen McCarthy. Sister Maureen, could you tell us the story of who Sister Joanne was and the circumstances surrounding her death, just to lay a bit of a foundation for everyone here?
I was asked to talk about the death penalty. But I can't talk about the death penalty until I talk about Sister Joanne Marie Mascha and what happened to her. Now, those of you who see the campus toward the west, and you see the new housing that's there for disabled adults, that's where our former mother house was. And it was raised for this new construction to take place. At that time, Sister Joanne Marie had a specific job to do, which was welcoming guests, the switchboard, the opening, and so on. And when her turn came on a Monday morning, she didn't show up. And people weren't terribly concerned because they thought maybe she had stayed overnight with a sister or with some family member. And it wasn't until they found her purse in the mailroom. Joanne never went anywhere without her purse. It had everything in it, from cameras to notebooks to candy to you name it, and it was in her purse. That made people really nervous when they found out she was missing. So they started a search around that former mother house in case she had been out walking and maybe fell and broke a leg or something. And in the interim, her sister and brother-in-law were leaving for California and called to say goodbye. When they found out she was missing, they immediately came to the property. And her brother-in-law, Ray, joined the other sisters looking for her. And Sister Praxity, sitting right here having her lunch, she and Ray were the 2 people who found Joanne Marie's body. And they found her body in the woods just adjacent to the parking lot. You look where the old volleyball court was, and the end of the maintenance building, the woods up there is where she was found. Now, I, in the interim, had called the police, and the police were setting up their office in our meeting room, and I was with the fire chief. Sister Praxedes, when she and Ray found the body, went to a neighbor's house, and she called me to let me know that they had found Joanne. Well, the way she said it, I knew immediately she was dead. And I told the fire chief, who in turn told the police, but he and I left right away. And we got to the woods before the police, and Ray had lifted the tarp that had covered her body, and it was very obvious, looking at her, that she had been abused. Her pants were down her, and her underwear were down around her ankles, so it was very obvious that she had been raped. And the look on her face is something that is etched in my mind until the day I die. And so the police arrived, and Sister Praxedes and I waited at the neighbor's house and answered police questions until the coroner came. When the coroner came and took the body, we returned to the mother house, and I went to the dining room and the healthcare center to tell the rest of the community what had happened. Now you can imagine the feelings that these women had, the anger, the fear, the just total confusion of how this could happen on our property in Pepper Pike. My goodness, you know. But anyway, after I had told the sisters, we went back to the office, the leadership team, one of whom is Sister Mary sitting here, and started to make some plans. And our community attorney had heard this on the radio, so she showed up to help us draft a statement to meet with the press. I went out to the front of the mother house, gave the bare facts that we knew at that time, and then promised to spend time with them the next day individually. Now this was a huge commitment of time, but we had learned in a PR program that the Ursulines took place in, that you don't allow 20 microphones in front of your face, but rather you control what the message is. So we decided the message would be violence against women. We had always stood for women. We started Ursuline College, a woman's college. So that was an important message for us. Early on in the interviews, one of the reporters asked me what I would think about asking for the death penalty. Well, he took me totally by surprise. First of all, the young man who had murdered Joanne was already arrested before Sister Praxedes even left the neighbor's house. They could track his footprints to Windy Hill, the first street over, that he lived with an old couple over there. So I never thought even of the trial since he had written out a confession. Well, I was so naive. And the thing was, when he asked me that question, I answered out of my own personal belief that I was against the death penalty. But as the words came out of my mouth, I knew instantly it would be the Ursuline position, since I was the president of the community. So after he finished, I went back to the leadership, told them what I had said, and the 4 other leaders of the community agreed that we should say it's the leadership of the Ursuline sisters who is against the death penalty. So we stood as a group, but we never had time to poll a community or ask what other sisters believed. And so we stuck with that whole view now with 2 messages. We were against violence to women, and we were against the death penalty. And we consistently repeated that over and over. And since it was a sister who had been murdered, the publicity was immense, and it even went national. Now, this was a tragedy, but we made a very distinct decision that we would use this tragedy as a ministry moment to educate the public against the death penalty and against violence to women. And that message continued. Now, after everything was over, the funeral, and we were getting ready for the trial, I had contacted all of the Ursuline communities in the United States and let them know what happened and asked for their support against the death penalty. And we had, in September, I believe it was, there was an Ursuline convocation in Kentucky, and over 600 Ursulines were present. And I spoke with the leadership of all those groups, told them the trial would be at the end of August, and begged them to help us to be a support against the death penalty. Well, the prosecutors were convinced they were going to get the death penalty. And we told them we were against it, and we had lots of support. Well, little did they know what happens when women religious across the United States work together, okay? So when it came time for the trial, now remember, this was 1995. No email, no texting, no cell phones, no social media of any kind. So I sent everyone the appropriate address for the Justice Center. I gave them the telephone number of the Justice Center. I gave them any kind of information they would need to make contact. The prosecutors and the attorneys begged us to stop because their fax lines, their telephones were just blocked. They couldn't get anything through, and their mailboxes. And one of the attorneys actually opened his briefcase and showed me it's stuffed with letters and cards. They literally got hundreds each day before the trial and all during the trial. The jury deliberated for 13 hours. And at the end of their deliberation, they had decided that Daniel was guilty of everything that he was charged of except prior aggravated murder. He hadn't planned ahead of time because he didn't know Joanne would be in the woods. But he was guilty of everything else. He definitely was to get the death penalty. But the jury made a mistake. When they sent the paper in with the verdict and what they were asking for, they forgot to attach the paper that asked for the death penalty, which meant he couldn't get the death penalty. And after the trial was over, the judge sent for the leadership to come to our office, and they told us that we had prayed that man out of the death penalty. And I really, truly believe that is the truth, because literally thousands of people across the United States, Australia, Canada, Central and South America, Peru, and other parts of the world had sent in letters, calls. It was absolutely phenomenal, the support that we had against the death penalty. So when you say, how did the Ursulines get involved in the death penalty? Well, it was an accident. I got asked a question, and I answered out of my own personal beliefs. And then gradually, sisters started to send us notes and say they agreed with us. And our social justice coordinator began to send out information to the community members on the death penalty, what was involved in it, what it meant. And about maybe 2 years later, we publicized a corporate response saying the Ursuline Sisters of Cleveland are against the death penalty. And that has continued. But last year, we received a letter from Daniel Pitcher, the young man who murdered Joanne. And in that letter, Daniel asked us to forgive him for what he had done. He took full responsibility for his actions, and he asked to let him be free from that guilt. As a community, we agreed together to do that, and we gave forgiveness. If we hold in anger, we hold in non-forgiveness. If we hold in hatred for that young man, we are the ones who are suffering. We are the ones who are being less than we should be as people. And so when we can let go and forgive the actions that this young man committed, it's a healing for all of us. And it doesn't minimize what he did. It doesn't make him any less guilty. And it doesn't say that his actions were totally wrong. But we can forgive because he has grown. He has tried to be a better man. And hopefully that continues until the day he dies. or is released from prison. It's still a cause for us. At our liturgies every morning, we pray to end the death penalty. We write letters. We make telephone calls. We continue to be active in our work against the death penalty. And I ask every one of you who haven't done anything yet, do it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Elwood Jones. I was an inmate on Ohio death row in 1994. I was working at a hotel in Cincinnati called Embassy Suite. And it was on September the 3rd one morning. I went to work at 5. I usually get there around 4:30. And when I got there that morning, I had to do a double shift up another co-worker who wasn't coming in. So I went up to the second floor in the MC suite to check the banquet rooms, and it was trash. So I got to clean them up, also helping comp workers, then go to the banquet department. So what I did is went back downstairs and got 2 trash bags, and brought them back up and tried to take all the trash out of there, take it down to the dumpster. On my way to the dumpster, I slipped going up the stairs. Cut my finger on the stairs up the dumpster, put it in my mouth and licked it, and thought that went in, cleaned it up, and went on back to work. About 9 o'clock that morning, there was loud screaming in the hotel coming from the second floor. Guests had went back up to their room. In their room, the guest who stayed with them was found on the floor dead, half naked and beaten, what I was told, seriously beaten back. Well, they thought for a minute it was some medical problem or something. Later on that evening, after she had been took to the hospital in Bethesda, they found out it was a homicide. So they invited all the employees to come up and give a statement of what they'd done that day and where they was at. I gave a statement, but I was at downstairs, and that was it. 2 days later, my hand started bothering me, and I went to workman's comp in Norwood, right outside Cincinnati. And they sent me over to Bethesda. My hand had got infected, so they operated on my hand that day, and they checked me into the hospital. I laid up in the hospital for 10 days. I got out. I went back to work to take that was on limited duty. When I got there that day, they asked me would I talk to the officers again. I said, sure. I had no question talking to the police. So I volunteered to speak to them. And I became a suspect because of the way I talked. They didn't like the words I had to say. And they let me go home that night after they did. And they started an investigation. They took my car and everything. A year later, I was arrested. 1 year and a month later, I was arrested for that. I went and got ready to go to trial. Went to trial and lots of evidence never turned over. Come to find out later, to make it a little bit short, I asked any questions on this. It was 4,000 some pages they didn't turn over. Inside of them 4,000 pages. The day that I got arrested, and there was 2 ladies in the Houghton County Jail. I was in the room watching the news at that time. You could see the news when they arrested people, and it was on there. The woman told the other lady in there, she said, my husband did that, and accused the black man of it. Well, when the woman got out of jail, she called the Blue Ash Police Department and told them that we don't need that, we got who we want. So, in 2016, the couples in there contacted me through, we had this email system in prison now. And I got the letter, the email, I sent it to my attorneys. They asked me, I said, I don't know, that's your job to find out. This is not my job, I can't do nothing sitting here. So when they investigated, it took 2.5 more years, that they hid the records, that neither one of these women was ever in jail, but there was. And there was another lady found it, put them in the computer, and both of their names on the range and all. That they're never in there, but they was in there, they was in there together. And that's what started the ball of actually the other piece of giving me a new trial and bringing me back. So I ended up doing 27.5 years on Ohio death row for a crime I didn't commit. Another 2.5 years fighting to get my conviction fully overturned. Every time I found something, I got out. I was able to, judge granted me a bond that prosecutor's office could appeal it. And so my fight is with the death penalty is there. I could have been dead. I had 6 execution dates, and I had one when I was on the streets. I could have, when I found out about it, I asked my attorney, what they gonna do, come to my sister's house and get me and take me to Lucasville and kill me? So the judge wrote to, sent a motion to Columbus, to the Supreme Court, saying Mr. Jones was granted 2 new trials and have a death date. So my goal is to fight to try to do away with the death penalty, but my main goal is to try to make prosecutors be held accountable, remove the immunity off the table that they have, that they can lock people up for no reason, and at the end of the day, they don't have to answer to them. They took my life and turned it all the way upside down. And today, I'm 73, going on 74, and I see it over and over. Who gonna harm me? Everything I had, I lost. I lost my family, my parents, my wife, and all. But some they did hurt me, and they knew I hadn't done anything.
Elwood, thank you so much for sharing that. I can't imagine, having to live through that. And you talked about both the experience of being in prison for so long and that loss. How did you maintain hope fighting for your innocence through that time?
Through the Lord. Through the Lord, my faith. If it wasn't for God, I wouldn't be here today. Because it's been a many days. I don't know which one I'm so good.
That's incredible. Thank you so much. And for Sister Maureen, you and your community started this stance against the death penalty before the catechism was changed, and before it became official church teaching that we all are called to oppose the death penalty. And you shared that this kind of came out of your personal values when you let it come out to that individual. Would you share what about your values or your community's values, or maybe the charism of the community, led you all to oppose the death penalty?
Well, just one comment before, when this was all going on, and you said we got lots of publicity, our stand against the death penalty came out about 3 days before the Pope said his. We beat the Pope. He published a paper, and we routed 3 days ahead. Well, as far as values, my background, I've been Catholic all my life. I was religious for a long time before that. And I was a theology teacher. And so I spent a lot of time with theology, religious studies, and it was just who I was. It was so spontaneous when I was asked the question about the death penalty. I never really thought, it just came out. And as I said, it was while I was saying it, I realized the importance of what I had said and what people would begin to think that there's a community thing. As far as the community goes, our mission statement is to change society through compassion, contemplation, and justice. Justice is a key. Contemplation and prayer, reflection is important. And of course, compassion is the heart. And so it's just so much a part of who we are as a community that, again, it was almost unanimous from the beginning. And in my memory, there was only one sister who was vehemently for the death penalty. And she was for almost everything negative. So she was one of those people. But basically, it was almost unanimous from the beginning that we were against the death penalty.
Thank you. Elwood, how has this experience changed your view of the U.S. justice system? I listened to an interview you had given, and you said that you're someone who really believes in justice, and that people who do wrong things, deserve the consequences of those. But how has this changed your views, or how have things developed?
It never really changed I know the justice system here in the United States is broken. It's broken in more than one way. And to everybody, I believe one factor, if I can get done or be an instrument and get changed, I think that we can everybody will be back on board in the justice system, to be fixed in a more positive way. And that's get rid of immunity for prosecutors. They had this immunity on the table, and with this, they can do no wrong. And at the end of the day, even when they caught, they still can't be punished. But they're the same group of people who always holler, no one is above the law. So my argument is no one is above the law. Let's take that away from you. So when you get caught doing what you did, even to me, you got to go to jail. And I think it would change the system. I truly do. And it would help. I think it's a way of fixing it. And I'm sure it can be other things did to it, but I think that's the start, the main start to get it through. Is moving that, just put it on a plain field that everybody has.
Absolutely, and I think it's really important for folks to understand that the reason you ended up in the situation you were in was because of misconduct, right? It wasn't mistaken identity, or it wasn't we didn't have the technology to assess the situation, right? It was people who made
evil prosecutors wasn't nothing pointing to saying I'd done anything. They just didn't like the way I talked to them. And I think it had something to do with my skin color. So I'm looking beyond that and going at what I think would change. And if you take that away, then what's the excuse? And believe me, they went to lengths to try to keep this covered. And so this is what made me fight a little bit harder. They even went to a forensics file, and there was no evidence saying I'd done anything. In fact, there was evidence saying several others, even besides that one person, going out to do it. They didn't like my attitude.
Thank you for sharing that. And just as we hear both of these stories in tandem about events that have happened in the past and their effects continue on to today, I want to move towards moving on and healing and things like that. Sister Maureen, your community, you shared about this, made the really brave and heroic step to formally forgive the man that committed this horrible crime. How has that process helped you all as a community in your healing process from this very serious loss?
Well, I think one of the things that helped us as a whole, as a community, is we had a very beautiful prayer service on forgiveness. And I think individuals worked on forgiveness in their hearts in their own way, their own method. But at this prayer service, we talked about forgiveness. We talked about the actual incident of Joanne Marie's murder. We talked about how we needed to forgive. And after, many, many years ago, after the actual murder, we had a day for our community where we brought in psychiatrists and psychologists and gave the sisters an opportunity to talk about their personal feelings, whether it was anger or fear or something else, that this had actually happened on our property. And so we've been working at this for a long time, whether we knew we were doing it or whether it was something we worked on together or it was just kind of intuitive.
Sure, thank you. And my last question is for both of you, and then we'll open up to some questions from folks that are here. You know, both within our faith communities, both Catholic and not, there are people who oppose the death penalty and those who support it. And in broader society, you know, when we ask people the question about life in prison versus the death penalty, we find out that less than half of Americans support the death penalty. But there's still a big group of people who do. And so this is for both of you, and either of you can answer first. What do you think people who support the death penalty need to hear so that they might start thinking differently?
I think if they actually heard the facts in some of the cases and knew the background of that person, they would have a different attitude. 90% of the guys that I see on Ohio's death row are men and women. Half of them are illiterates. So who are we kidding? Let's be honest. And I think if they knew that, it's no justice over there. I'm not saying they should be spared for what they do, but shouldn't be put to sleep either. So I think if they had that information, they'd have a different attitude.
I think just this past week was a good example of how people react sometimes. You all saw about the teacher who was killed by a prank that went wrong. And the first person who asked to forgive the kids who did it was the wife of the man who was murdered, was killed. Now, that was not capital punishment. That was not the death penalty. But I think the mind and the heart of that woman is similar to the people who are against violence of any kind, who are against the death penalty. And we know there might be some of us sitting right here who carry anger within us for something that's happened in the past. And we're not able to let go of that anger within us. And I think the people who are filled with that kind of feeling, they can't help their decisions sometimes because they're blinded by what's happening inside. So I think we who don't feel that way should pray for them. I think we need to encourage people to be open to change in their lives and to look at other people and see that other people can change and maybe feel forgiven because we allow them to be forgiven. So I think it's interior in everybody, and it's part of how our life experiences have been. It's what we've experienced personally. It's what we're allowed to let go of and what we're still holding on to. And I think we have to make the decision interior.
Thank you both for sharing that. And we want to open things up to some questions from you all gathered here. But before we do that, can we all please give our speakers another round of applause? I really thank them for sharing stories that aren't easy to share. So for Q&A, Deacon Mike is going to come around. He'll just very briefly ask you about what your question's about, and then he'll hand the mic to you, and please make sure to speak directly into the mic. That's the way that we can make sure that folks who are listening online can hear us.
Anybody has questions? Raise your hand. I can start us out with one if that's okay. Sister, can you tell us a little bit about the relationship that the Ursulines may have with Daniel now today?
We don't have a personal, we don't have a personal relationship, and we were told not to, but that was part of receiving the letter, that it was at the end, terms of contact.
I'm Sister Carol Pellegrin, and I have a question. I'm wondering why a lot of people are not aware that there have been a considerable number of prisoners who have been exonerated. I don't think I've read about that. I mean, I have, but I don't think it's prominent in people's minds that there are people that have not been well represented, or for whatever reasons. Anyway.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, why is this not more well known? That you know, as I mentioned at the top, Elwood here is the 202nd innocent person free from death row. In the 12th from Ohio specifically. It's a great question. What I've noticed, you know, CMN is a national organization, so we talk with folks all over the country. And frankly, even in states that are actively executing, these are not major stories in the news. A reality of incarceration and the way it's handled in our country is we sort of physically remove people from our presence and also mentally do so by locking them up and calling them the worst of the worst, and then that's all that's sort of done with them. And I think what that does is it creates a system where these things just aren't even talked about. Now, sometimes they are. I think the case of Robert Robertson, who is a man in Texas who was on death row, has had national attention to his story. But it takes a lot of heavy lifting to get there, and folks need the supports, and they need connections with a broader community to lift those up. But it's hard when you're removed from a community.
Other questions?
Elwood, how do you spend your time now? What are some of the things you did?
I spend most of my time days, I was a Catholic, I'm no longer part of the Catholic. I'm a part of the Methodist group. And so what I do is volunteer. I feed the homeless, and go read up in Pricey over Cincinnati to the kids. I find other things to do to help and around the city, try to organize, to get people, make them aware of my situation and the situation of the homeless, because I truly believe that we can do better in that city across the state. Sometimes I run into great walls and I think I can do more enemies, do mayors and all, but I still got to do what I got to do to try to change it. So that's what my day is.
Sister Maureen, I know that there's a lot of people that carry heavy things in their heart that they're not able to forget, or they don't feel that they're able to forget. And I think your story of how all of the sisters were able to come together and forget is so powerful. Have you thought about doing anything publicly? Because, you know, something that you said really, really struck me, that maybe it's that people are holding on to something and that they can't forgive, and that's why they can't see the death, getting rid of the death penalty. Because, you know, if they can't forgive something, then we need that kind of punishment for people. So have you guys thought about things that you might be able to do to help the public forgive things that they're holding on to?
Personally, I have not. I know with our social media through the community, We do send out weekly different reflections on Facebook and through our UrsulaneSisters.org page. And I know that when we had the forgiveness evening, a lot of that was published, it was on television. I mean, those kinds of things. But in terms of dealing with personal feelings of individual people, I have to say no, mea culpa.
So my question's kind of for both of you, or whoever wants to take it, but from a position, kind of looking at it from a faith perspective, whether from the Catholic perspective or what I think you mentioned from the Methodist perspective, I encounter a lot of people even within the church, not even in our broader society, who will openly say that, well, I disagree with the church's teaching on this and I'm for the death penalty. So as someone who works within the church, what kind of messaging or how can we practically reach those in our faith tradition what would you share with them, I guess would be my question.
Well, first of all, I don't think the church has done adequate education very clearly. I have never heard a homily. I have never heard a talk where someone officially from the church has talked against the death penalty. And I think it's not just the sisters who need to do this, but it's the clergy as well, the churches as well, regardless of what the denomination is, they need to be involved. And when someone is freed, it needs to be a big deal. And I think we need to get more social media, the television stations, the newspapers. I have a very good friend, and if I told her about this today, she wouldn't have a clue about your story or others like you. And she's a really good person, goes to church regularly, but she's never heard it, except what she hears from me. And so I think the church, society as a whole, and the media have all done a terrible job.
I agree with her on that subject. What I tried to do in my church is that I know a reporter in Cincinnati. I know quite a few about that, and one of them named Curtis Fuller. And I brought him over to my church, and he interviewed them, all the people who actually around me daily. We work together, do different projects, and asked what they thought of me and all. Supported. They support me, but the church did not support me. So I get that, and I don't know why. It's just that they say they can't do that. It's just something about churches, no matter what, they cannot jump out there on that man. And they won't jump out there on that man.
As a deacon sister, I'd like to invite you to St. Chris and Rocky River, where I preach on the death penalty quite often. And it's the only time I get hate now. It's really true. I mean, it's
Probably negative.
You ain't kidding, yeah.
When we were going through this at the time of Joanne Marie's death, we received one negative letter. Every other comment that came in was positive about what we were doing. So I don't know if it's just that we're the people who follow the Ursulines or have a relationship with us, but it was a positive feedback that came from everything that we did. I wish it had been even more. And I want to tell just one story about that. We got a letter from a sister. I mean, this is horrific. She wrote and thanked us for publicly saying that Joanne Marie had been raped, because she had been raped in her convent by a priest, and her superior told her to keep quiet. Now that cries to heaven for vengeance, not violent vengeance, but just, it's terrible. And so thank God it touched one person positively to say you're okay, regardless of what happened, because you're not alone in this. Other people are experiencing this. And why can't we reach out to more people who have these terrible pains animal suffering caused by either the church, by other people, by actions they may have performed themselves when they were young and still don't know how to get over. So we have lots of work to do, and it might start with just one family member. It might start with one friend. It might start with one person that you can touch in some way, because we have to reach out. If we're disciples of Christ, it means touching people, physically touching people by our presence. So let's do it.
Elwood, can we give you the final word as someone who's the head of chaplaincy services here in the diocese? What can people do in terms of visiting people who are incarcerated? Like, how much did that mean to you when people came to visit you?
Well, the rules have changed a little bit about visitation. I didn't have outside visitors besides my family come and see me. But now they have changed as far as inmates getting visits and mail and all this is not in existence. It's like you send a piece of paper, and I send you a card, you would never get that card. You would get a copy of that card. So I don't know how to answer that or what would you make a difference in there. But I believe we could help all if we can just come up with a way to do away with the death penalty. And that would solve one major problem.
So we've heard some really powerful stories today, and I want to just take these last few minutes as we wrap up to say, how can we actually get involved to end the death penalty? I'll put this QR code back up at the end, but I want to let you all know here that as Ohioans, there is a viable bill in the Ohio State House right now to end the death penalty. And we are truly like this close. This QR code, and we have flyers with more info in the lobby too, will show you how you can contact your local legislator and tell them that you support the bill to end the death penalty. I know that is a series of steps we have to take, but this is almost a now or never moment here in Ohio. We have a governor who does not want to carry out executions, who we believe would sign this bill. And there's lots of support already, but we're just trying to get it over the line. So there'll be more information at the end about this. Likewise, we need to advocate for those men and women all over the country who were scheduled for execution. In the next month and a half, 3 men are scheduled for execution in 2 states. James Duckett and Chadwick Willesee in Florida, and James Broadnax in Texas. Catholic Mobilizing Network has a way for you to sign up to receive advocacy alerts. We send emails to our followers whenever an execution is scheduled, and you can sign on to a letter that we send to the governor and to the parole board asking to grant clemency to these men and women. We do this for every single execution that happens, and you can write these letters from anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world. CMN is on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. We post a lot about information about the death penalty, updates, things like that. We have a death penalty quarterly, which gives you lots of information about the death penalty and what's going on in our country. And you can also pray with us. Every first Friday, we host a virtual prayer vigil on Zoom. And we usually have over 200 people come and join us from all over the country. If you or your community would be interested in taking a more direct role in leading those prayers, you can speak with me about that too. We have religious communities and different organizations from all over the country help with that. And for our young adults in the room, maybe the way that you can end the death penalty is through your own creative power. We host a Justice and Mercy poetry contest every year. The winner receives a cash prize and reads their poem at a big event we do at the Vatican Embassy in Washington, D.C. So a really special opportunity. And this year we're honoring a poet, Kendrick Simpson, who was executed last month in Oklahoma. Poetry was a way for him to heal and to reckon with everything that had brought him to death row. His poems are really powerful. And so we see the power of the arts to transform, and that opportunity is a really special one that we have. But let's just wrap up. I think we have one more person who's going to lead us in a concluding prayer. This prayer was written by Sister Helen Parmesan, who's the church's biggest advocate, or most public advocate, to end the death penalty.
Hi guys. I'm Jade Lewis. I'm a senior this year in the Ursuline community, and I major in art therapy. So let's get this prayer on. God of compassion, you let your rain fall on the just and the unjust. Expand and deepen our hearts so that we may love as you love, even those among us who have caused the greatest pain by taking life. For there is in our land a great cry for vengeance as we fill up death row and kill the killers in the name of justice, in the name of peace. Jesus, our brother, you suffered execution at the hands of the state, but you did not let hatred overcome you. Help us to reach out to victims of violence so that our enduring love may help them heal. Holy Spirit of God, you strengthen us in the struggle for justice. Help us to work tirelessly for the abolition, thank you, of state-sanctioned death and to renew our society in its very heart so that violence will become no more. Amen.
Thank you all so much for coming. I just want to give a couple of thank yous. Thank you to Sister Nicole and Yolanda and the whole Ursuline community for allowing us to be here and to sharing this time with you. Thanking the folks from the Diocese of Cleveland, Kelly, Tony, and Deacon Mike, and everyone else who has been planning these events for a while. And of course, Elwood Jones and Sister Maureen for sharing some very personal stories with us. And I pray and hope that those are really transformative. There's lots of information in the lobby, ways to get involved with both the Diocese and Catholic Mobilizing Network, and info on that bill. And I'm going to leave these two QR codes up here for you if you'd like them. One is for information about the abolition bill, and the other is to sign up to advocate to save the lives of every man or woman scheduled for execution in our country. Thank you again, and God bless you. Thank you both so much. And the food is for all of us, so please, if you haven't eaten lunch, get a plate and enjoy.
Or if you need dinner, take it with you.